Remember, it's a snapshot in time right now. Things can change. I would assume a lot of races are going to tighten up between now and Election Day. But remember, yesterday a local political polling firm released a surprising survey that revealed Governor Katie Hobbs beating her Republican opponent Andy Biggs by 15 points. Now today, that same firm released results for the rest of the statewide races down ballot. Here are the top lines. In the Secretary of State's race, incumbent Democrat Adrian Fontes leads his Republican challenger Alexander Colladin by 10 points. For Attorney General, incumbent Democrat Chris Mays is 8 points up over her GOP opponent Warren Peterson. Now moving down to the state treasurer, Democrat Nick Mansour holds a 3-point lead over Republican Elijah Norton. And finally, in the race for Superintendent of Public Instruction, Teresa Leyva Ruiz leads her GOP candidate, her challenger Kimberly Yee, by just a single percentage point. Now, given that Republicans outnumber Democrats in Arizona by more than 300,000, we asked the guy who conducted the survey what's happening. Paul Bentz is a Republican pollster and said his party is just having a tough time keeping their voters this year.
There's a couple of problems. Number one, we see several of the Republican candidates getting about 70% of their base support, with somewhere between 10 and 12 points worth of Republicans voting for the Democrat. So they need to solidify their base, number one.
And the other problem, according to Bentz, Republicans are losing support among independent voters. His numbers show that Republicans are trailing those voters by 10 to 20 points. Now, independents are the second largest voting bloc in Arizona, and these are voters who have been determining close races here in Arizona over the past several election cycles, guys.
I mean, a number of factors at play, from name recognition to money. Isn't the big factor President Trump? I mean, his approval ratings are in the tank. They're in the 30s.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't help, you know, and always the party in power, you know, in the White House, their party loses seats down, you know, in the congressional races down ballot. But when you're talking about a recent poll that came out that showed Mr. Trump, President Trump at 33% approval rating, that's going to leave a mark. And then Republicans here in Arizona losing Republican support, even if it's 10, 12 points, that's significant. Remember, 300,000 people an advantage of voter registration is huge. That's larger than the size of Gilbert. That's larger than the size of Chandler. And that edge is being neutralized because at this point, according to Bentz, according to this poll, Republicans, a good chunk of them are moving over and choosing the Democratic candidate.
Yeah, you said this is a snapshot of a point in time, and it's interesting to see what will happen with the general election, because we know there have been a lot of inconsistencies in the primary polling with the outcome of the primaries, like swapping around. So
polling has definitely changed.
Yeah.
It's definitely gotten a lot harder, and it's definitely like, look, it's gotten less trustworthy over the years. But these do give us a sense of where people are. I would look more at the trend of what's happening here, and if I was, you know, leading the Republican Party or Republican right now, I'd look at that trend line saying, this is kind of concerning here. All our statewides are losing or in statistical ties in races that we shouldn't, this shouldn't be happening.
All right. Dennis, thanks.